Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation. I hope that everyone can hear me well. I'm very happy to participate in the 7th International Conference on Second Language Studies, and I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the conference board for organizing and holding this conference, one of the key conferences in the world of VLT theoretical and practical innovations. Best wishes to all conference participants from Lomonosov Moscow State University, where I work and enjoy my academic life at the Department of Linguistics, Translation and Intercultural Communication. I enjoy my life as a university teacher and supervisor of master's degree and PhD students, a curriculum and coursebook writer, a researcher in the field of comparative, culture-bound language pedagogy. As I've used the conference presentation template and guidelines, I hope it won't be any difficulties in following my talk. I'll begin by looking at the sociocultural context of PhD language education in Russia, which influences much the linguo-didactic choice of approaches to teaching, learning, and assessing PhD's communicative competencies to use English as a lingua franca for their academic purposes in intercultural settings. Then I'll move on to the state of the art of teaching and learning academic writing to international students, the research questions and methodology, making very brief comments on them, and sometimes even skip over some of them in order to have more time for making comments on the research results and discussion of the crucial issues of creating a socio-cultural theoretical framework for developing PhD students as successful international academic writers. Successful academic writers who are willing to cooperate with researchers from different corners of the world for educational and research purposes. And I'll end with conceptualizing the linguo-didactic notion of international academic writer and hot issues concerning the strategy in establishing the framework under consideration. It will take about 30 minutes to make my presentation. If you have a look at slide 4, you might see that Russia's higher education system has become part of pan-European university education, being much involved in Bologna processes and the process of tuning educational structures in Europe, though this involvement has started much later than in other European countries, only in the second decade of the millennium. And the dominating characteristic of higher education in Russia are competency-based university education, in which systems approach, problem-solving, and socio-cultural approaches are employed with a view to open education, open science, open innovation, and open to the world. The next slide illustrates some possible career PhD holders' paths in Russia as university teachers and researchers, higher education administrators, intercultural analysts, curriculum and coursebook writers. And in today's globalized world, PhD holders are expected to act appropriately in the national and international settings of academic communication. Otherwise, a PhD student's career in Russia might be less successful if he or she hasn't become a bilingual, cross-cultural and pluricultural academic mediator, a competent academic speaker and writer. If you look through the overview of the state of the art in the area of teaching academic writing on slides 6, 7 and 8, you would agree with me that academic writing has been a central topic in first and second language education since the 1980s. Scholars involved in researches and academic writing, its teaching and learning methodology, have generously shared with us their vision of new approaches to it. What have they shared with us? Firstly, their proofs on the necessity for differentiating between English for general academic purposes and English for specific academic purposes. Secondly, they have proved that genre analysis of academic discourse should be a prerequisite for identifying aims and purposes of introducing EAP into the language classroom, choosing appropriate approaches to genre-based academic writing instructions. Thirdly, nowadays, due to their research efforts, we've been equipped with a linguo-didactic description of academic genre variety of writing, which then have been introduced into teaching and learning practices. More than that, it has been suggested that new approaches to building a bank of academic phrases should be research-oriented and discourse-based on one hand, categorized and conceptualized in terms of functional competencies on the other hand. It is also worth mentioning that research-oriented frameworks for developing international students' academic discourse competencies have already found its implementations in a variety of EAP teaching materials published by the leading European publishing house. However, as has been mentioned earlier, these teaching and learning materials have been designed mostly with a view to developing international students' academic competencies who learn English in English-speaking environments. But pedagogical observations in the foreign language class in Russia give us more than enough evidence on possible cultural clashes between national and international academic cultures and modes of academic behavior, leading to PhD students' unwillingness to write and publish research papers in English in foreign international journals. And in connection with that, a number of questions should be studied and answered by researchers without any delay. What sociocultural aspects of academic communication should a foreign language PhD student be aware of in order to achieve a community of success in academic written communication? What challenges are faced by modern PhD students who learn academic written English in non-English speaking countries? What is a PhD student as international academic writer in modern globalized world? These research questions are listed on slide 9, whereas slides 10 and 11 give necessary information on the methods used, discourse sources analyzed, as well as on survey and interviewed participants. Well, I'm going to skip over this and the next slide because of time limits, and besides, I think they do not need any additional comments. The next 6 slides, from 12 up to 17, give us some important evidence on the scope of academic writing activities which Russian PhD students can or can't do in English, and the language users' reflections on their writing experience in different academic genres. With the exception of writing lecture notes, most of the writing genres listed in the table on slide 12 are culture-bound, as far as their discourse formats are concerned. The only exception somehow is writing lecture notes. The data table on slide 12 contains information on Russian PhD students' experiences in genre-based academic communication. According to the data, many students, but not all, believe that they have got enough experience in writing lecture notes. 27 respondents out of 30. Resume, 15 out of 30. Presentation text, 10 out of 30. And about research findings, 15 out of 30, and filling in conference registration forms, nearly all of them. But even in these all cases, much less students who can do this quite easily. The data given in this table also indicate almost a complete lack of the respondents' experience in doing regularly various types of academic and research writing in English, in which Euro-Atlantic formats of written discourse patterns are expected to be used, because it is the Euro-Atlantic format of academic production and interaction that nowadays dominate in international research communication. Why is it so? Partly it is because of the fact that some types of academic writing are not peculiar to Russian academic culture. For instance, writing lecture diaries, case studies, essays and reports, applications for the research questions and the like. And even if some types of academic writing are used in Russian academic culture, their structural composition and discourse characteristics are quite different from the similar writings in English, especially if we compare discourse schemata and stringency of academic requirements to written products in Russian-speaking and English-speaking academic communities. The pie chart on slide 14 shows that up to now, the abstract type that dominates in Russian articles is a descriptive one, with a very loose structure, whereas in English articles nowadays the preference is given to informative abstracts, correctly structured in terms of requirements to this piece of writing. It's interesting to note that in English-speaking countries, descriptive, well-structured abstracts were once used in papers related to humanities, while on the contrary, informative abstracts were initially used in papers relating to natural sciences. Now, in European countries, the structure of informative abstracts is part and parcel of the Euro-Atlantic style of academic culture. And what about Russia? In Russia, since 2015, some Scopus-indexed humanities journals have started a publishing campaign for introducing the informative abstract format in Russian academic written communication. The table on slide 15 illustrates some of the most considerable differences between discourse structures used in Russian-speaking and English-speaking language space, among which of special interest are the following. Firstly, as far as an article is concerned, it is required to follow a directed writing format in English, whereas up to now there is no such a requirement in the Russian guidelines on writing academic papers. Academic discourse patterns of communicating research information in English-speaking environments are much more regulated with conventional rules of academic written production, in comparison with the Russian academic style of communicating research information. Paradoxical and funny as it may sound, but we Russians are more idea-focused than rule-bound academic community. And it is because of some specific sociocultural characteristics related to Russian national academic culture that the Euro-Atlantic formats of academic written production should be given a special attention in the language classroom. The Euro-Atlantic discursive format of scholarly communication is introduced by me in LT methodology as an umbrella term for a set of framework requirements for the researcher's oral or written production, or interaction strategies and activities which are usually observed in European research space and are always fixed in the European documents relating to a particular communication genre functioning within a particular scientific event. But developing students' awareness about the Euro-Atlantic format of academic communication doesn't mean that the Russian style of research communication will be completely rejected. Nothing of the kind, because it has got some communicative and cognitive values which are not sometimes clearly identified and understood by an English-speaking academic. And now, the point that I would like to discuss is the following. In a globalized world, we have no other choice but to try to reach a didactic balance between a pan-European focus and national priorities in developing PhD students as international academic writers and speakers. And for this purpose, I believe that it is a document analysis of international and national descriptors or modern research profiles given in European and national educational recommendations that is needed to be conducted while developing the framework under consideration. In other words, a document analysis related to research policy and training is a desirable prerequisite for establishing a university framework for developing PhD students as international academic writers and speakers. The sources listed on slide 17 seem to be of primary importance for discussing approaches to developing PhDs as international academic writers. As you can see, nearly all of them have appeared quite recently in the European education area. Among the sources listed on the previous slide, of special interest to EP specialists is the European Commission's publication under the title Towards a European Framework for Research Career, that has outlined and defined the 4 career stages, namely first stage researcher up to the point of PhD, recognized researcher, PhD holders or equivalent who are not yet fully independent, established researchers who have developed a level of independence, and leading researchers leading their research area or field. Each of these research profiles has been described in terms of necessary and desirable research competencies. For example, the description of the first stage researcher, in other words, a PhD student, is given on this very slide. But the necessary and desirable competencies should be clarified and interpreted in the terms of the first stage researcher's bilingual communication skills and cognitive abilities, which PhD students should be able to demonstrate while using first, second, or a foreign language for research purposes, and it is the job of applied linguists. For instance, as far as academic written language is concerned, PhD students should be able to do critical reading and reviewing in English in their native language, to choose and use the most appropriate discourse forms and language repertoire for communicating their research aims, methodology, results, implications, and perspective, to avoid terminological lacunes, to mediate a research text using translation, and to follow the international code of the research. And it is in such a way that the descriptors of the researchers' profiles mentioned earlier are to be given a linguo-didactic interpretation. By the by, what is of no less importance is exploring academic discourse for the purposes of international research cooperation and partnership, and that needs to have a linguo-didactic look at scholarly events as specific communicative events, characterized by being planned, organized, and unfolded, characterized sometimes with highly structured patterns of verbal and non-verbal behavior in accordance with the prescribed communication script schema for the whole event, as such, in general, and in particular with a view to an academic social role of a conference participant or attendee in a particular event. For example, in a conference where he or she is either a paper presenter or a poster presenter or a member of the audience or a session moderator or a panelist. I'd like to emphasize the point that PhD students should be trained in performing not only the roles ascribed to the first stage researcher, but the roles performed by the researchers of higher ranks. For we have to remember that he or she would not be a PhD student all their life. As you've noticed that in my talk I use the term international academic writer, but not intercultural writer. The key identifying characteristics of international academic writers are given on this slide, and the concept of international academic writer seems to be much broader than the notion of intercultural speaker introduced by Professor Byram and Professor Gramsci in the book Language Learning in International Perspective. So, how can we categorize this notion of an international academic writer? Well, any scholar who is supposed to be an international academic writer should first of all be able to act in academic settings across the globe in accordance with the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. Besides, he or she should deliberately choose the dialogue of academic cultures as his or her lifestyle, and he should be able to overcome communicative or cognitive dissonance, and if so, he should be able to act as cross-lingual mediator or pluricultural mediator in case of necessity. For this purpose, he should be equipped with analytical skills and ability to think and act strategically. But at the same time, he or she should be able to vary his communicative patterns of behavior if some changes happen to occur in international academic communication. And if so, he or she can't but be active participants in real academic events. And that speaks for the necessity of professional bilingualism in academic writing. Professional bilingualism is one of the most distinguishing characteristics of his or her academic behavior. And the next slide reflects my views on the criteria for evaluating PhD students' performances as international academic writers. These criteria include academic politeness, discourse intelligibility, communicative and cultural adaptability, genre appropriateness of academic style, and research integrity. It seems to me that these criteria can be used for evaluating not only academic written production, but academic spoken production and interaction as well. To sum up what I have talked about, I would like to stress the point that the sociocultural approach presupposes that the linguo-didactic framework under the discussion should be established on the basis of the results of complex, comparative, culture-bound analysis of, firstly, international scholarly events in English-speaking and non-speaking countries, for example in Russia, the communicative scenarios, cognitive inputs, communicative and cognitive actions of participants with different research ranks and academic status. Secondly, written types of academic discourse used in Russian-speaking and English-speaking academic settings. And finally, cognitive and cognitive barriers most commonly experienced by PhD students in international academic setting. All research findings reported and discussed in this presentation surely are of preliminary nature. They need to be verified further in PhD education, as well as at other cycles of university education. Because what is badly needed are not simply some improvements in this or that segment of university language education, but getting a better, methodological understanding of the differences and similarities in EAP teaching and learning in scholastic environments on one hand and research environments on the other hand. Without such understanding, it would be hardly possible to design a three-level genre-based system of EAP education on interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary basis, which would stimulate language and non-language specialists to work in a conceptual tandem while training university students step by step as international academic writers. As such, international academic writers who are capable to think and act in the context of the dialogue of academic cultures and not their confrontation, to vary the academic strategy, style, and sociocultural patterns of communication discourse in accordance with an internationally supported code of research production and interaction in a localized academic community, and, if necessary, to act as a cross-cultural or pluricultural mediator, helping other academic actors of research and development, intercultural cooperation. I'll skip over slide 27 because of time limits, and I think that there is no need to give additional comments on it, because it is quite possible for the online audience simply to read my suggestions for further research on this slide. I would like to thank the online audience for being here today and listening to my presentation. I really appreciate that very much. And I would like just to finish by paraphrasing the words of a famous poet. All the academic world's a stage, and all PhD students, PhDs, professors are merely players. They have their own exits and their own entrances. They play many parts in their academic lives, and I wish every academic success in all their walks of life, in all your walks of life. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them online or offline. My email and Skype are given on the final slide.